Like, just saying to pull the trigger to kill your son, no, not right.
Day 3 after murdering someone.
Whoa! Don't put that on camera.
Most crimes are committed by adults, but sometimes kids cross unexpected lines. From the girl who murdered her own brother to the kid who unalived a child to stop her from crying, join us as we take a look at the most feared kid in U.S. prison. Number 10. Eric Smith. The name Eric M. Smith is etched in the annals of American crime, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can reside within the human psyche, especially in the most unexpected places. On a seemingly ordinary summer day in 1993, the idyllic tranquility of Steuben County, New York, was shattered by the brutal murder of 4-year-old Derek Roby. Every single detail of this incident sends chills down one's spine. How a 13-year-old boy can abuse and take the life of another child is baffling to say the least. The investigation that followed led to the shocking revelation that the perpetrator was none other than 13-year-old Eric Smith. The details of the crime, the luring of the young victim into a secluded wooded area, the savage assault, and the chilling act of pouring Kool-Aid into the boy's wounds, sent shockwaves through the nation. Smith's trial captivated the country as the public grappled with the incomprehensible notion that a child could commit such a heinous act. Legal proceedings were further complicated by the unprecedented nature of the case. Smith became the youngest defendant in New York state history to be tried as an adult for murder. The ensuing years saw Smith navigate the complexities of the juvenile justice system, serving his sentence in various correctional facilities. While incarcerated, he expressed remorse for his actions and sought to understand the factors that contributed to his violent outburst. The case of Eric Smith serves as a reminder of the enduring questions surrounding juvenile crime, the interplay between nature and nurture, the potential for rehabilitation, and the societal responsibility to address the underlying issues that may contribute to such tragic events. It is a story that continues to resonate, prompting ongoing discussions about the justice system, mental health, and the complexities of human behavior. These same questions emerge when examining other cases of juvenile crime, like that of Joshua Phillips. Number 9. Joshua Phillips. On November 3, 1998, 14-year-old Joshua Phillips made a choice that would change his life forever. While home alone in Jacksonville, Florida, Phillips agreed to play baseball with his 8-year-old neighbor, Maddie Clifton. Despite knowing he was not allowed to have friends over while his parents were out, Phillips invited Maddie inside. As they played, tragedy struck. Phillips accidentally hit Maddie in the eye with the baseball. Injured and crying, Maddie began to scream. Panicked and terrified of his abusive father's reaction, Phillips dragged Maddie into his house. He later claimed that her lower body clothing came off as he pulled her inside. Desperate to stop her from screaming, Phillips struck her with the bat and hid her beneath his bed. When his father returned home, Phillips acted as though nothing had happened. Later that evening, Phillips discovered Maddie was still alive and moaning under his bed. Overcome with panic, he removed the mattress, retrieved a knife from a Leatherman tool, and took Maddie's life using a knife. Maddie was reported missing at 5 o'clock that evening. Over the next 6 days, police and volunteers conducted an extensive search for her. Phillips participated in the search efforts, concealing the truth from everyone. During this time, Phillips later admitted he tried to live in denial, saying, "I was putting myself in a fantasy world, that nothing had happened. That was my defense mechanism for everything when I was a kid. I never made the decision to ignore it. I just did. On November 10th, 1998, Melissa Phillips, Joshua's mother, noticed a suspicious wet spot on the floor of her son's room. While investigating, she made a horrifying discovery. Maddie's body was hidden beneath the bed. Melissa immediately left the house and called the police. Phillips was arrested at school later that day. Within hours, he confessed to Maddie's murder. Prosecutors challenged parts of Phillips's story. They suggested the crime might have been sexually motivated, citing evidence that Phillips had previously discussed sexual topics with Maddie and her older sister, Jessie. However, the autopsy found no signs of sexual assault. Investigators also noted inconsistencies in Phillips's account. For example, they found no blood in the backyard or on the baseball Phillips claimed had caused Maddie's injury. Additionally, the lack of dirt and sand on Maddie's body did not support his assertion that her clothing had come off as he dragged her into the house. Phillips was tried as an adult. Due to the widespread media coverage in Jacksonville, the trial was relocated to Polk County, Florida. Richard Nichols, Phillips's defense attorney, employed an unconventional strategy by calling no witnesses. Instead, he focused solely on his closing argument, portraying Maddie's demise as an act that began as an accident and deteriorated through panic that bordered on madness. Melissa Phillips disagreed with Nichols's approach, but Joshua's father, Steve Phillips, insisted on trusting the lawyer. Joshua never testified during the trial. He later claimed that Nichols never discussed the details of the case with him and only played chess during their jail visits. The trial began on July 6, 1999, and lasted only 2 days. With no defense witnesses, the jury deliberated for just over 2 hours before convicting Phillips of first-degree murder. At 14 years old, Joshua Phillips was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Because he was under the age of 16 at the time of the crime, he was ineligible for the death penalty. The case of Joshua Phillips and Maddie Clifton remains one of the most unsettling examples of how fear and panic can escalate into unimaginable consequences. The next incident tells us that not one, but 2 people, who are also brothers, were involved in unaliving their loved ones in cold blood. Number 8. Beaver Brothers. The Broken Arrow murders, also known as the Beaver family massacre, occurred on July 22, 2015, in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. Brothers Robert and Michael Beaver turned their home into a horrific crime scene, unaliving their parents and 3 of their siblings in what became the deadliest crime in the city's history until 2022. At approximately 11:30 in the evening, 12-year-old Daniel Beaver made a frantic call to 911, reporting that his brother was attacking their family. The dispatcher could hear screaming and chaos in the background before the call abruptly disconnected. Unable to reach David Beaver, the family's father, dispatchers traced the call to 709 Magnolia Court and sent police to investigate. Upon arrival, officers saw blood on the front porch. After knocking on the door and hearing a faint cry for help, they forced entry. Inside, they found 13-year-old Crystal Beaver, critically injured from multiple stab wounds. She was pulled to safety and rushed to a hospital, where she underwent surgery and was declared in serious but stable condition. As police continued through the house, they found the remains of 5 people, including 12-year-old Daniel, all of whom succumbed to multiple sharp force injuries. Among the deceased were David and April Beaver, the children's parents, along with Daniel and their siblings, 5-year-old Victoria and 7-year-old Christopher. 2-year-old Autumn Beaver was found unharmed. Crystal Beaver later identified her brothers, 18-year-old Robert and 16-year-old Michael, as the attackers. According to Crystal, The brothers lured her to a bedroom under false pretenses before injuring her throat and stabbing her in the stomach and arms. Police found an assortment of weapons at the scene, including knives and hatchets, as well as protective gear used by the attackers. The brothers fled through the back door and into the woods behind their property. A law enforcement unit quickly tracked them down at 12:18 in the morning, finding the pair hiding under a bush. Robert was armed with a knife at the time of his arrest, but neither brother resisted. Robert and Michael Beaver were charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of assault and battery with intent to unalive. The brothers pleaded not guilty at their arraignment on August 3, 2015. Over the next several months, the case progressed through multiple hearings, with delays to accommodate legal proceedings and evidence review. On September 7, 2016, Robert Beaver pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to 5 life terms without parole, plus an additional life sentence. Michael Beaver's trial began on April 16, 2018. After nearly a month, the jury found him guilty on May 9th. On August 9th, 2018, he was sentenced to 5 life terms without parole. And that's not all the people who ended up ending the lives of their own family members. Sierra Halseth unfortunately went down the same route. Number 7. Sierra Halseth. In April of 2021, the remains of 45-year-old Daniel Halseth were discovered in his Las Vegas home. He had suffered extensive injuries, his body showing signs of severe trauma and attempts to destroy evidence. The gruesome crime was committed by 2 teenagers, Halseth's own 16-year-old daughter, Sierra, and her boyfriend, 18-year-old Aaron Guerrero. In an interview with a news investigator, Guerrero revealed chilling details about the murder. "She got the weapon first, and I always carry a weapon, so that's what led to what happened," he said. When asked whose idea it was to commit the murder, Guerrero responded, "It was both of our ideas because we didn't know exactly what we were going to do, but we knew we had to do something about it, and it turned out terribly wrong." The pair claimed that Halseth abused and mistreated Sierra, though Halseth's family firmly denied these allegations. Following the crime, the teenagers stole Halseth's car and fled. They were later apprehended in Salt Lake City. Before their capture, the pair recorded a video where Guerrero was seen saying, "Day 3 after murdering somebody." Sierra quickly responded, telling him not to say that on camera. Guerrero later admitted, "We were both trying to cope with what happened, and I can't speak for Sierra, but personally, I feel guilt every day." In October 2021, both Sierra Halseth and Aaron Guerrero pleaded guilty to murder. They were each sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 22 years. At the sentencing, Sierra showed no remorse, while Guerrero offered an apology. Guerrero spoke from jail the day after his sentencing, admitting to mental health struggles and substance use. He revealed that he was not taking his prescribed medication at the time of the crime, stating, "I would pretend like I was taking it, and I feel like that has some form of impact on what happened." He also confessed to using LSD, which he said exacerbated his mental health issues. "I don't think I would have been capable of something like that had I been sober. It's a psychological drug, and when you have a mental illness, it only makes it worse." Guerrero expressed hope that he could one day prove himself to Halseth's family. "I want to show them that I'm not a monster, that I still have potential to be a functioning member of society and can benefit society," he said. Currently housed at High Desert State Prison, Guerrero stated he plans to have no contact with Sierra Halseth, who is serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center in North Las Vegas. Reflecting on their relationship, he said, "I think I acted more out of impulse than what you could call love." Sierra Halseth's parents had a contentious relationship that included a public divorce and a custody battle. Her mother, Elizabeth Halseth, is a former Republican state lawmaker, adding a layer of public scrutiny to an already tragic case. This crime left the Halseth family reeling and serves as a grim reminder of how deeply poor decisions and unchecked emotions can destroy lives. But this incident that's coming up next was not a case of poor decision-making. There were simply ill intentions. Here's what Heavenly Arroyo did. Number 6, Heavenly Arroyo. And for number 6, we have the most feared kid in U.S. prison. On October 6, 2019, 15-year-old Heavenly Arroyo committed a devastating act in Fall River, Massachusetts. Armed with a pair of scissors, she entered the bedroom of 68-year-old Ana Vasquez Rodriguez and attacked her multiple times. The murder occurred in the home of Arroyo's great-uncle, who had taken custody of her just 1 week earlier. Arroyo's great-uncle and his girlfriend had taken her into their home at the request of Arroyo's mother. On the day of the incident, the couple planned to take Arroyo to New York to visit a relative and complete legal documents to finalize custody. However, car troubles delayed the trip. As the day went on, Arroyo grew increasingly agitated. Late in the afternoon, she retrieved scissors from the kitchen, entered Vasquez Rodriguez's bedroom, and carried out the brutal attack. Vasquez Rodriguez, bedridden and unable to defend herself due to a prior stroke, was unalived in her bed. At the time of the murder, the victim's grandson was in another room playing a video game with headphones on and was unaware of what had occurred. After slaying Vasquez Rodriguez, Arroyo showered, discarded her blood-stained clothes in a nearby dumpster, and calmly told the grandson that his grandmother was not feeling well. The grandson went to check on Vasquez Rodriguez and immediately called 911 after finding her unresponsive. When police arrived, Arroyo initially claimed she had been outside with the dog and saw a masked man fleeing the house. However, while in custody, she made multiple admissions that implicated her in the crime. On January 16, 2023, Arroyo pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in Fall River Superior Court. Judge Renee Dupuis sentenced her to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 19 years. The case was prosecuted by Assistant District Attorneys Dennis Collins and Mary Claire Flynn. District Attorney Thomas Quinn described the tragedy, saying, "The defendant brutally took the life of the victim, who was only trying to help her move forward with her life. The defendant was 15 at the time and suffering from mental health issues. However, the facts of the case clearly show she is a danger to the community, and the state prison sentence is appropriate." He also extended his sympathy to the victim's family, adding, "There is nothing any of them could have done to prevent this terrible incident from occurring. I hope the resolution of this case brings some closure to them and they can try to move forward with their lives." Speaking of moving forward, Curtis Jones entered prison as a child and left as a man. But how did this come about? Number 5. Curtis Jones. In 2015, Curtis Jones walked out of South Bay Correctional Facility in Florida, marking the end of his 18-year sentence for a crime committed in 1999. His sister, Catherine Jones, is also scheduled to be released this week. At just 12 and 13 years old, Curtis and Catherine were convicted of unaliving their father's girlfriend, 29-year-old Sonia Spates, in Cocoa Beach, Florida. Prosecutors allege the siblings were jealous of Spates. However, Their defense argued the children were reacting to years of child abuse by a relative and felt unprotected by their father and his girlfriend. The siblings accepted a plea deal and were sentenced to 18 years in prison. At the time of their sentencing, Curtis was the youngest person in the United States to be convicted of first-degree murder. Curtis's release highlights how much the world has changed since his sentencing. Their release brings an end to a case that sparked national discussions about the treatment of juvenile offenders and the impact of childhood trauma on violent behavior. And even though violent behavior might be planned sometimes, it doesn't always end up as a success. Number 4. Roxan Sikorski. On October 17, 2014, 17-year-old Roxan Sikorski carried out a crime that would fracture her family forever. In a moment of unimaginable violence, Roxan stabbed her 23-year-old autistic brother, Tyrone, multiple times while he slept in their Michigan home. What makes the case even more disturbing is that the attack was not spontaneous. It was planned. In the months leading up to the attack, Roxan had begun a romantic relationship with 22-year-old Michael Rivera. The relationship quickly became toxic as Rivera allegedly manipulated Roxan, encouraging her to harm her brother. According to court records, Rivera believed Tyrone posed a threat to their relationship and convinced Roxan that violence was the only solution. On the night of the attack, Roxan armed herself with a knife and entered Tyrone's room. While he lay defenseless, she stabbed him multiple times before fleeing the scene with Rivera. Tyrone, despite his life-threatening injuries, managed to crawl to a neighbor's house and call for help. He survived the attack, but was left with significant physical and emotional scars. Police quickly apprehended Roxan and Rivera. Investigators uncovered text messages between the two that detailed their plans for the attack. These messages revealed Rivera's role in manipulating Roxan and encouraging her to commit the crime. Prosecutors argued that Rivera preyed on Roxan's vulnerabilities, fueling her actions. Despite her age, Roxan was charged as an adult with attempted murder. Rivera faced similar charges for his role in orchestrating the attack. During the trial, Roxan's defense team painted a picture of a troubled teenager manipulated by an older boyfriend. They argued that Rivera's influence and control over Roxan had pushed her into a desperate state, leading to the attack on her brother. However, the prosecution highlighted the calculated nature of the crime. They pointed to the text messages and the premeditation involved, arguing that Roxan was fully aware of her actions. In 2015, Roxan Sikorski pleaded guilty to charges of assault with intent to murder. She was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. Rivera was also convicted and received a similar sentence. The attack left the Sikorski family shattered. While Tyrone survived, he faced a long road to recovery, both physically and emotionally. The betrayal by his own sister added another layer of trauma to an already horrific event. The case of Roxan Sikorski raises difficult questions about manipulation, accountability, and the devastating consequences of toxic relationships. It serves as a stark reminder of how vulnerable individuals can be exploited and how those choices can lead to irreversible consequences. And then we have two kids who went to school but couldn't live long enough to fulfill their dreams. Dreams that were shattered by a high school student handling a weapon. Number 3. T.J. Lane. On February 27, 2012, students at Chardon High School in Ohio began their day as usual. The cafeteria was bustling with activity as students gathered for breakfast or waited for buses to vocational schools like Auburn Career Center and Lake Academy. At approximately 7:30 in the morning, the routine was shattered. A student, later identified as Thomas T.J. Lane, stood up in the cafeteria and began firing a handgun, creating panic and chaos. Surveillance footage showed Lane targeting a group of 4 male students sitting together. He fired multiple shots, hitting all 4, then wounded a 5th student. As Lane fled the building, he fired again, striking a female student in the hallway. 2 staff members, teacher Joseph Ricci and football coach Frank Hall, pursued him, forcing him out of the school. Lane was apprehended shortly after, near his car on Wooden Road. 5 students were hospitalized as a result of the shooting. 16-year-old Daniel Palmator was the first to succumb to his injuries, passing away later that day. Daniel had been waiting for a bus to Auburn Career Center, where he studied computer science with dreams of working in technology. 17-year-old Russell King Jr. was pronounced brain dead early the next morning. A junior studying alternative energy technologies, Russell was also enrolled at Auburn Career Center. His family honored his wish to donate his organs, providing hope to others even in their grief. The following day, 16-year-old Demetrius Hewlin passed away. Friends described Demetrius as a kind and athletic student with aspirations to join the football team. His mother, Phyllis Ferguson, spoke publicly about her loss, expressing forgiveness for the shooter and finding solace in her faith. Joy Rickers and Nick Wolsack, both injured in the attack, were treated at local hospitals. Wolsack sustained severe injuries, leaving him paralyzed. Another student, Nate Mueller, suffered a superficial wound when a bullet grazed his ear, but did not require hospitalization. The Chardon High School shooting left 3 families grieving unimaginable losses and a community struggling to heal. In the wake of the tragedy, messages of sympathy and support poured in from across the country. Vigils and memorials were held to honor the lives lost and to provide solace to those affected. The actions of T.J. Lane highlighted ongoing issues surrounding school violence and the need for improved support systems for troubled youth. The attack forever changed the lives of the students, staff, and families involved, leaving scars that time alone may never fully heal. And then there are some people who get off on committing such acts that they end up giving themselves a pat on the back after doing such heinous stuff. Number 2. Alyssa Bustamante. On October 21, 2009, 9-year-old Elizabeth Olton vanished from her neighborhood in St. Martins, Missouri. Her disappearance led to a frantic search, but the truth was far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Elizabeth had been lured into the woods by her 15-year-old neighbor, Alyssa Bustamante, who then strangled, stabbed, and unalived her. The motive for the crime was as senseless as it was horrifying. Bustamante later admitted that she ended Elizabeth's life simply to experience what it felt like to take a life. She recorded her actions in her journal that same day, writing about the murder in chilling detail. Though she attempted to scribble out her words later, investigators were able to recover the entry. In it, Bustamante described the act as amazing and wrote that once she overcame her hesitation, she found the experience pretty enjoyable. Following the murder, Bustamante attended a church dance, while police and community members desperately searched for Elizabeth. Alyssa Bustamante's life had been marked by instability. Her grandparents, Gary and Karen Brooke, gained custody of her and her 3 younger siblings in 2002 after her mother struggled with addiction and her father was incarcerated. Friends began noticing alarming changes in Bustamante around 2007, when she was hospitalized after a suicide attempt. On social media, She listed cutting as a hobby and shared photos of herself mimicking a gun to her head. These warning signs, however, went unheeded. By the time of Elizabeth Alton's tragic end, Bustamante's mental health struggles had escalated to a dangerous level. Bustamante was charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. She initially pleaded not guilty in November 2009. However, in January 2012, she accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to second-degree murder and armed criminal action. The court sentenced her to life in prison with the possibility of conditional release for the murder and an additional 30 years for armed criminal action. Her sentences were ordered to run consecutively. Mental health evaluations during the trial revealed that Bustamante suffered from major depressive disorder and borderline personality disorder, factors that were considered but did not mitigate the severity of her actions in the eyes of the court. In March 2014, Bustamante's appeal against her sentence was denied. In July 2024, she was denied parole, with her next hearing scheduled for 2029. Elizabeth Alton's mother, Patricia Price, filed a lawsuit against Bustamante, ensuring that any compensation Bustamante might receive from media coverage would go to the Alton family. This case left a lasting impact on the St. Martin's community, serving as a grim reminder of the devastating consequences of untreated mental health issues and the tragic loss of an innocent life. Finally, we're going to take a look at the effect of negative entertainment and how it manages to impact the lives of children in a terrible light. Nobody knows this feeling better than Lionel Tate. Number 1. Lionel Tate. On July 28, 1999, 12-year-old Lionel Tate was left alone with 6-year-old Tiffany Unick in Broward County, Florida. Tiffany was being babysat by Tate's mother, Kathleen Grossett Tate, while the children played downstairs, watching the professional wrestling program WWF SmackDown. Component placement, loud noises prompted Tate's mother to call down and ask them to quiet down. 45 minutes later, Tate informed his mother that Tiffany was not breathing. Medical examination revealed horrific injuries, including a fractured skull, a lacerated liver, a fractured rib, a swollen brain, and extensive bruising. The force of the injuries was likened to those sustained in a fall from a 3-story building or being struck by a speeding car. In January 2001, Lionel Tate was convicted of first-degree murder for Tiffany Unick's tragic demise. Prosecutors argued that Tate fatally injured Tiffany while imitating wrestling moves, but the court deemed the violence intentional rather than accidental. Judge Joel T. Lazarus described Tate's actions as cold, callous, and indescribably cruel, sentencing him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. At the time, Tate was only 12 years old, making him the youngest person in modern U.S. history to receive such a sentence. The case sparked widespread debate over the treatment of juveniles in the justice system, with critics arguing the punishment was excessively harsh for a child. In January 2004, an appeals court overturned Tate's conviction, ruling that his mental competency had not been assessed before the trial. This decision allowed Tate to accept a plea deal he had initially rejected. As part of the agreement, Tate was released from prison on 1 year of house arrest and 10 years of probation. The case of Lionel Tate and Tiffany Unick remains one of the most controversial in the history of the U.S. juvenile justice system. It continues to raise questions about accountability, rehabilitation, and how society should handle serious crimes committed by children. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.